I want Hill to dominate general aviation over the next 40 years. And the whole world is built on difficult. People that do difficult things do very well. Yeah? If it's easy, anybody can do it, and then it's worthless. It's about you do whatever it takes
To make it happen.
Because if you don't, you'll fail. It's haunted me. It's been like some kind of religious calling. I just can't shake this need.
Jason,
Hey, Ruben.
I'm going to spend some time talking about the past, the moment we're living right now, and also the future. But today we want to really dig into more of the person of Jason. I want to hear a bit more about your story. I know most of it, but I think I'm also going to be surprised because some things we have talked about and some things are still to be mentioned and shared. I remember that. Do you remember when we met?
2018.
I think that's right.
June the 11th.
That's right. Going around the world, and you contacted Misha through his YouTube channel, Pilot Yellow. What was going on in your life at that time? It was 2018. I know this project was already going heavily in your mind share, but what made you contact me and then also get to actually expand beyond your circle of family and close friends and knew about this? But there was a moment you thought, this is the moment I want to just crack it out and start doing beyond.
So at that point, I'd been running Dynamiq, my engineering company, for well over a decade, and we'd been incubating the development of HX50 and GT50. I'd got to the point where it was basically the embryo of what became what you can see behind me. But the single challenge that I faced is it takes a lot of work and a lot of resources to complete the engineering of something like this, and the nature of the kind of engineering work that I did, which was solving the most difficult problems in engineering, so designing things that other people couldn't design and analyzing things that people couldn't analyze, and getting to the nub of problems on one different thing after another. That's a really difficult business to scale. And so no matter what I tried, without making my focus developing an engineering corporation, that business wasn't going to scale very easily. And so given that the whole purpose of setting up Dynamiq was to incubate the development of the helicopter, I'd got to a point where I thought, look, the only practical way to get this to accelerate now is to find a way to bring in some money, some investment of some kind. And so I'd been dabbling with that since I was 21. You know, as I was going through my PhD, I'd reached out to people, said, look, I want to do this, and are you in? But you're totally you have no credibility at that point. You haven't done anything, so nobody's going to believe that you can pull something like this off. And so in 2018, it was before we'd managed to get awarded the UK government grant. I'd got this well-developed concept, this well-developed business model. I knew exactly how we were going to do it, but I couldn't afford to put enough money into it. I hadn't got enough money to be able to accelerate the program. And so I'd been reaching out to all sorts of investors, all sorts of government bodies, everything you can possibly imagine, to bring in the resources that I needed to be able to accelerate the development. And I came to the conclusion very early that because this is such a mad thing to do, it was going to take somebody that was themselves either very knowledgeable or very passionate about general aviation and understood the unique mess that it had become, that lays the groundwork for what the business opportunity is. So I needed somebody that was some form of investor and really understood General Aviation and was really passionate about helicopters. And I'd been, like all good helicopter geeks, I don't watch TV in the evening. I watch helicopter clips on YouTube. And just before that period, Misha's YouTube channel had become quite popular. It was prevalent. It had found its way onto my feed. And I'd been just looking longingly at the amazing backdrop and just the day-to-day flying around that he did. And I'd just been following that as an escape in the evening. And then all of a sudden, this sort of new character appeared on the vlog that I don't think it was ever made clear, but it was pretty obvious to me that he was an investor of some description or a VC guy of some description. And I thought, there's a VC guy. He's a helicopter nutcase. Why don't we go and make contact and see where that goes? And at that point, you and he had just started your world trip, which again was a great thing to watch in the evening. And I thought, well, I'll go and talk to them. What have I got to lose? I'll reach out to them, see if they see anything in what I'm doing, see if there's any common ground. And so we always take a week's holiday at Whitsuntide, so the end of May, spring bank holiday into that first week in June. And I'd been in Spain with Izzy and the kids and my parents. And we tried to organise it for me to come and meet you in Lisbon, but it didn't work for one reason or another. So your next stop was Mallorca, and I was in Murcia. So I said, went to the airport, sent Izzy and the kids home on an aeroplane, and I jumped on a different plane and came over to Mallorca and met you at the golf club in Palma, I think it was, or something.
That's right.
So,
you know, the thing that impressed me most at that time, that moment, was just your drive. Your drive was impressive. You didn't let go. I was very impressed with that. So when did that started? Because you were a kid like anybody else. What's your family background, and what was your say your life before 2018, many years? Because at that time, how old were you in 2018?
oh, there's a maths question. I was 40.
40, right? Is that
Yeah,
important moment of life that you
Yeah.
mature enough, you feel you have energy of life, right? And
Yeah.
you have the full maturity. But before that, you were already an entrepreneur. You were doing things, driving your own business. Tell me a bit more. How did that come about, and how early was that?
So I come from a working class family, really, that's made its way up to what we'd call the middle classes now. So my dad started out as a motor mechanic. He fixed cars and trucks and things like that. And my mom has always been at home with me and my brothers. And so I come from a very traditional family. My dad came from a very working, well, both my mom and dad came from a very working class background. They started with absolutely nothing. And I came along when my mom was very young. And my dad at that time was employed by a local garage. And if he hadn't done a little foreigner, a little job on the side by lunchtime on a Tuesday, he wasn't going to have enough money for the rest of the bills at the end of the week. And he made the decision when I was a baby that wasn't enough for him. That wasn't good enough. That wasn't how he wanted to live. And so he set up a business himself. So he set up a garage, a car repair garage. And throughout all of my childhood years, I watched him drag himself up from absolutely nothing, with a sort of trade education, no sort of college, no university or anything, a trade education, learn everything about business the hard way. But I watched a man with huge drive to live better, whose sole objective was to provide a better life for us, and to better himself. He was always, and still is, I mean, he's 78 now and still works 6 days a week. Yeah. He's always been about providing a transparent, honest, and faithful service to all of his customers. He operates in a small village where everybody knows everybody, so you can't make any mistakes. You can't get a bad reputation, otherwise it's over. And over the years, I watched that process through determination and long hours in a really difficult market where it's essentially a race to the bottom because lots of people can do it. They all undercut each other. It's a very difficult business. I watched him become successful through hard work and huge integrity and gradually improve the quality of our life until we got to the point where we were living very well. And so I grew up knowing what it takes to build something from nothing. That was my normal. I grew up knowing what the impact on family life and your social life and this perceived work-life balance is for people that choose that path in life. I know what it means to look after people and the consequences for not looking after people and living with the damage to your reputation. So that was all instilled in me from a very young age, and the very fundamentals of business, of only being as good as your last job, and having to maintain that level of performance and that level of reliability. That was all instilled in me from the age of about 2, because that was when Dad started working for himself. And throughout all of my formative years, he's been an amazing role model in terms of how you do it from scratch. And if you then cast me in the context of the rest of my family and my broader family, I'm actually the weirdo in my family. All of my brothers were naturally really gifted sports people. They all excelled, and that far away from making it as professional footballers and that sort of thing. And I was the one that was rubbish, right? I was never any good at that. I was a goalkeeper that couldn't catch and couldn't kick, right? So, but what it became very clear that I was very good at, and it was actually, I never felt academically special when I was at elementary school or primary school, but very quickly after I went to secondary school, it became clear to me that there were things that I was very good at. And I started to excel at that point. And then I excelled through high school, I excelled through my A-levels, I excelled through university. I then went on and did my PhD. And I was actually the first person in my entire family to ever go to university. So there were no role models for that.
Straight to a PhD.
And I went all the way through. Yeah, I did one year in industry with Leonardo in the middle of my first degree, and then they sponsored my PhD as well. So I went straight through. So from starting with in a working class family, and my dad was always very supportive of education. He couldn't do my maths homework with me, but he always instilled in me how important it was to be educated, to have something that you can offer, to have something that makes you special from everybody. And he gave me every bit of support that you could possibly imagine. And when it came to the end of my PhD, the worst part of a PhD isn't doing the clever stuff that you're remembered for, it's writing it up. Yeah. Writing a literature survey of a bunch of boring old papers, and then writing a textbook basically on something that's really, really technical and dry is very hard work. And that always goes on a bit. That always goes on after the 3-year term, and that's where most people fail, right? That's where the grant money stops, and you're on your own, and you're often then starting to look for work. And at that point, my dad continued to support me to make sure I didn't try and go and get a part-time job to fund myself, to make sure that I wrote it up. So I have an awful lot. I owe him an awful lot for the grounding in how it is you build something from nothing, the people side of business, how you cultivate and maintain a reputation, and how important that is, and what hard work really looks like, and what it means, and what the impact of that is in the short term, before you have anything meaningful to show for it. So I have a really solid grounding in all of that, and I got used to being the odd one out in the context of my family and my other brothers quite early on, because they were all going in that direction. I was going in that direction. I was always the weirdo that wanted to design this helicopter.
When did that happen?
And so
When did helicopter pop up in your mind? You know, say, I want to build a helicopter that nobody has thought of yet. That's going to disrupt
at,
the industry. When did it happen?
at high school, at high school, I knew that I wanted to be an engineer, and I became really, really fascinated with helicopters. So
With aerodynamics as well?
everything about them. At first, you your fascination follows your mental state at any time in your life. So for me, at first, I was captivated by Airwolf and Knight Rider, these techie products from the 1980s in the TV shows. And I loved the excitement of the technology. I loved the excitement of the capability and the coolness of what these things could do. But then as I grew up and I became more educated and capable myself, I started to be fascinated about how helicopters worked and how they did what they did. And then as you start to become aware of how people live and things like that, I started to love the idea of what a helicopter could do for you in your life, you know, literally pick you up from your back garden and take you to anywhere that you wanted to be. It was the vehicle for accessing another worldly life, and I loved that. And then as it became really clear that I was a natural engineer, the sort of technical complexity of a helicopter, both mechanically and aerodynamically, just absolutely captivated me, because it brings all of the things that are really stimulating to my mind together. The sort of creative industrial design side of it, the really core mechanical engineering, you know, forging metal components out of super high quality materials using really clever manufacturing processes, and then the out and out academic challenge of the aerodynamics of helicopter rotors and helicopter interactional aerodynamics. That sort of stuff's just fascinating. You can never get tired with that. You know, there's still millions of problems to solve. There's still things that would make game-changing differences to helicopters when you dedicate enough time to solving those problems. So it's an area of interest that just gives and gives and gives. And from a society point of view, they're looked upon as such cool things.
Mesmerizes, helicopter
They just mesmerize. They mesmerize children, and they mesmerize adults and people as well. They're in the movies everywhere. They do the most important jobs in society, and they ferry the iconic and cool people around in society as well. So it's always captivated me. And from about my early teens, so from the earliest parts of my high school years, I just haven't been able to get the idea of making a helicopter for myself out of my head. It's haunted me. It's been like some kind of religious calling. I just can't shake this need to have to do it. And the turning point for me, I've always wanted to do it, and I've always been very strategic about doing the things I need to do. Excel at school, go and get a mechanical engineering degree because it's more of a machine than a helicopter. Then go and get the capability to do the aerodynamics, because you can't read that stuff in a book. It's really difficult. You have to get proper training. Then build some experience so you know how the business of engineering works. And then once you know enough about that, get cracking and design it. And the turning point when I met you, and it wasn't so much meeting you, although that was obviously a big trigger. Up until that point, I'd been ferociously working through every option you could imagine to try and find a way of getting enough resources into Dynamiq to be able to accelerate this through to fruition. And by the time I got into my late 30s and then my 40s, that had become really urgent, because I knew how long this process would take. I knew how big a job it was. and I was just cognizant. And I could actually hear an interview with Frank Robinson in my head at the moment, where I'll just use the same words that he did. With he was cognizant that he got to, in Frank's case, he was 43, and he felt like he hadn't started his life's work yet, you know. And up until that point, I'd felt that everything had been a preparation for what I'd got to do, and I knew that what I'd got to do was a big job. And so around 2016, 17, 18, I was furiously working my way around options to get the resources in to finish the job.
You were running Dynamiq by then, right?
Yeah, so I started trading as Dynamiq as a sole trader in 2005, and eventually went limited in 2007. So I'd been running Dynamiq for 11 years then. So I'd got this huge track record of solving some of the most mad technical problems you could imagine. Loads of really interesting and difficult work for companies that you would think should surely be able to sort their own problems out.
How much did the Dynamiq actually shape you and prepare you?
Hugely. I could not have done this without what I learned in Dynamiq. So Dynamiq was my first outing as a businessman. It was my first serious exercise as a professional engineer, and it was ruthless. You know, it
Why is that?
It was because everything was a one-off. You know, in a well-formed business, you go in and you do the thing. McDonald's make burgers. They make burgers every day. They know exactly how to make burgers. Dynamiq was nothing like that. Dynamiq was a really clever engineer with a bunch of the latest simulation technology, going out and solving new problems every single day of the week. So you were using raw academic and technical capability and intellect to solve something new every day.
So you say you were called to solve difficult problems that the
Yeah.
company was seeking a solution,
Yeah.
that they needed an external analysis and an outcome that they were not being able to
Yeah.
fulfill at that
A
point.
lot of engineering and a lot of business, the business of engineering is very ordinary. We do more of the same. We make a minor change to something we're doing. If you're trying to develop something new, or if you have a requirement that's asking you to qualify something that you've built to a higher standard than you ever have before, very quickly these companies will run out of capability. Their existing staff don't have the knowledge or the skills to do that. And I did. And so I would go in and
Specialize in problems.
yeah, specialize in solving difficult problems, specializing in providing high levels of engineering analysis across all of the sort of mechanical disciplines. So stress, vibration, heat transfer, fluid dynamics, multi-physics problems, and then anything that required that technology to be able to design it. And so, but the problem with that, the problem with being in the business of problems, is that everything you ever do is a problem, right? And so these jobs would come to you and they would already be on fire, right? They're already late. The customer was already distressed, and they were coming to you as a last resort because they didn't want to pay a premium to get the job. They were coming to you because they were desperate. So it gave me an amazing schooling in dealing with people playing very high stakes games with things that were very important to them, that were already in distress. So they were already in very difficult commercial circumstances, and you were trying to engineer and operate not only a very difficult technical problem, but a very difficult commercial and human situation as well. So it provided a level of schooling and experience that money couldn't have bought that. Money couldn't have bought that, because it very quickly taught you everything you need to know about the positive and the dark side of human nature in a business context. It really taught you to know what you knew and know what you didn't know. So know the boundaries of your expertise and only ever pitch squarely in the middle of that. Because if you tried to take something on that you really didn't have a clue of how to solve or how you were going to set about it, you'd be in there on a fixed price with a fixed time scale with no idea. So I got very, very good at quickly working out what the real problem was, what the solution strategy was, what the plan B, C, and D were, and then being able to execute those projects quickly and efficiently while managing the difficult commercial circumstances that the clients were in at the time. So that really, it taught me everything you could ever want to know about working under pressure. It taught me everything you could ever want to know about doing these sorts of jobs where everything is uncertain, right? There's, at the time you take something like that on, you don't really understand everything that you're going to have to do to solve the problem. You understand what your solution strategy is going to be, and you go in and you start, and every time you peel away another layer, you find another mess that you've got to deal with. And learning how to manage the customer's expectations while you were going through that process, and learning how to stay calm and focused and just work the problem was totally invaluable. Nobody could pull something like this off unless they'd had a similar experience to that. But it also taught me a lot about what scales and what doesn't, and
Yeah.
solving really difficult problems as a one-off every time doesn't scale. You know, you need to make a product of some description.
So if you were to put a weight, I'm curious about this because this is fascinating. If you were to put a weight on the importance of what you're doing today, on your formal education and your real life experience of Dynamiq, give me a split of percentage. I'm really curious about that. What do you think?
I'm going to split it into 3 categories. So, and this is Jason Hill, 47 years old now, right?
Now.
These percentages would have changed over the years, but I would say 30% of the way I conduct myself and my ability to take the pressure and continually function comes down to the way I was brought up and what my sense of normal is. So that's purely down to my mum and dad. And then 65% of it is what I learned running Dynamiq.
65?
65% of it. And 5% is the formal education.
Wow.
And that isn't to say that formal education is hopeless and useless. That's
totally
absolutely not the case.
But to do the job,
we try and recruit graduates, right? We try and recruit young engineers and engineers of all stages, right, into this company. And I tried to do it in Dynamiq as well. And because the body of technical knowledge is now so vast, the amount of knowledge that you have to have just to be able to even understand what people are talking to you about is huge, right? And then if you're doing something difficult, the amount of specialist knowledge that you need to then be able to contribute to it is another order of magnitude again. And then to be able to do something original or pioneering is another magnitude again. And it was really constantly being thrown into that situation where you're on your own, there's no one to ask, and it's your problem, mate. That has been so formative to me over a very extended period. You're talking sort of nearly 15 years of my life I was living with that gun to my head to solve those kinds of problems. And that has brought me on to a totally different level to anything that you could have ever been formally trained for. And it's a mixture of there's the kind of cross-linking of knowledge that goes on in your head. You've got all these different disciplines that you get taught, but you really have to understand how they all interact with each other. So you only really get that by applying it and seeing enough of it in different applications. And then the other thing in modern engineering that's really important is having all of the tools of the trade immediately at your fingertips. So you personally being able to do 3D CAD modeling, to be able to produce drawings, to be able to write lengthy hand calculations modeling the physics and the behavior, to be able to run finite element analysis yourself with your own hands to study stress, vibration, heat transfer, any combination of those physics, static problems, transient problems, to be able to use computational fluid dynamics yourself with your own hands, to be able to simulate fluid flows and thermal problems that involve fluids and things like that. To have all of that at your fingertips is crucial to be able to solve these kinds of problems. But that now becomes half a lifetime worth of learning. You know, and not just learning, this is learning through practice, learning through using it and applying it. And that has been essentially a half a lifetime's worth of education to put yourself in the position where you can do this kind of thing. And you really can't helicopter people in to be able to do that for you. You know, you end up having to sort of be the visionary, the leader, set the direction in all these areas, so that people with a sort of narrower band of expertise, it might be much deeper than your own expertise, but they don't understand about X, Y, Z, and everything else
Full
around
scope.
them. They just understand
They haven't
that.
done it, yeah.
And Dynamiq gave me that. Dynamiq gave me that, and so I would say
The big school education was Dynamiq.
yeah, the real world. This is what it's like. When you try and do it, this is what it's going to feel like, and this is what people are going to say to you and threaten you about if you don't get it right. These are the circumstances you're going to have to work under. This is how difficult it's going to be able to get people around you to support you and to get the other things done that you need, and having that that solid grounding of that's just what business in the real world's like. You know, it's not about it's 5 o'clock and my work-life balance clock says it's time to go home, and I don't work weekends, and this and that. It's about you do whatever it takes
to make it happen.
Because if you don't, you'll fail. And I had that drilled into me from an early age. My entire professional experience, with the exception of about 18 months, has been working under those kinds of circumstances.
18 months where when you
that
worked
was at Leonardo. Sorry,
Leonardo,
it's not 18 months, it's a bit longer than that. About 18 months at Leonardo, and then a couple of years immediately after I'd finished my PhD doing a little bit of lecturing. So if you wonder why I'm good at presenting, it's because I used to be a lecturer.
Now I get it. Okay, that makes sense.
So,
fascinating, fascinating. And in Dynamiq, when you were actually on that reality of day-to-day in Dynamiq, you were doing these complex projects, you were solving problems. At the same time, you still wanted to be focused on what you wanted to achieve in life, which is Hill right now.
Yeah.
And how much of your time, or how much of your mind share, and when did you actually feel that during the Dynamiq period, you were going to shift someday, it was going to be it will become so big on you that you could be just fading away Dynamiq and shifting altogether to the Hill project? Because there's a time of that, you know, that moment that you think, yeah, it's going to come. But because you were doing this at the same time, you were nurturing Hill, or you were actually developing many things that we know now. They were done back in Dynamiq, right? So, and even the relationship with the CAA and having the vision to come up with the experimental route first, and all those strategic decisions, that was during Dynamiq, right?
Yeah. So the true value and benefit to me in the program of Dynamiq is almost a happy coincidence, right? That wasn't what the plan was when I started off. So Dynamiq, I set it up to nurture this project. It was supposed to be an incubator.
Was it?
To
fund it?
To fund it.
From start?
Right from the get-go, right from 2005, I'll set an engineering company up, I'll build a little cell with all the facilities that I need to do the helicopter, and all the profit we make we'll use to develop the helicopter. Right.
Yeah.
But the real world of building businesses isn't like that,
No.
right? Particularly if you're in the business of solving hot potato problems for people, because it's totally all consuming. So the idea was scale it, get some staff, get the staff working on projects that earn money, and then I can turn my attention to the strategic work, develop the helicopter faster, and then we happily send Dynamiq down the river when we're finished with it.
Was naive of you at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's how we all start, right?
Yeah.
And what really happened was very quickly you gravitate in any business towards the niche bits of work that are most profitable, most lucrative, the things you get good at winning, the things that you're unique about. And the problem with being a good engineer is you can do things that other people can't. And that then means you can charge what you want for them, so you can make good money, right? And so I started
Could be addictive.
Yeah. I made a load of money in my first year and thought, wow, I'm rich. And then you get onto the treadmill, don't you, of just keeping up with it, and your life improves and your living standards go up, and then you're back on that treadmill trying to keep up with the life that you've created. But the main problem that I ran into once I'd got Dynamiq established was the fact that because all the work was so difficult and so varied, you really couldn't recruit people that could do it at a rate that you could make any money out of. You know, you couldn't go and get ordinary engineers. You needed really special guys, but the really special guys couldn't work under the pressure that those sorts of jobs brought with them. And so it maintained a level of dependence on me actually doing the work for so long that I could never get away from the coalface. So we ended up having a great track record and making a decent amount of money, and it got me established in life. But it took me probably 5 or 6 years before I'd got any spare time at all. And then even then, I was only able to put sort of 20%, maybe 30% of my time into developing the helicopter for quite a long time. So that's why the early years of developing the aircraft were so protracted, because it's a massive job and you were just trying to pick away at it at sort of realistically less than a day a week, in and around trying to keep the wife happy, trying to keep the kids happy, trying to keep the customers happy, and trying to do everything else that you've got to do.
Massive undertaking.
So
Yes.
it was really, really challenging in that respect. It just took ages to get to the point where I could put any time into it at all. So there was never a sort of turning point where I thought, you know, I've got so busy with the helicopter, I can afford to let Dynamiq go. It was, how quickly can I get out from under Dynamiq to dedicate myself to the helicopter? And as we got into the sort of 2010, 2015, yeah, say the mid-teens, the mid-2020s, it was really clear that I'd got to do it a different way. I'd either got to change the way Dynamiq worked and go and produce stuff, go and do the kind of work that was going to be much easier to scale. But I'd come to know a lot of those businesses, the companies that rented out people by the hour, companies that did engineering drafting, people that did simple product development. They didn't really make any money until they got absolutely enormous, and that would have been a lifetime's worth of work. So I realized that I'd got to find another way. And we had a bit of a turning point where we had a run of a handful of jobs where we made a load of money. And all of a sudden, I'd got enough cash behind me to make a big leap in how far the engine had come. And I got a lot of the key concepts with the engine sorted, so I knew what we'd got to do with the engine. I got the basic configuration clear in my mind. And at that point, we were able to attract the Innovate UK grant, which was a total project value of 1.9 million, if I remember the numbers properly off the top of my head, and they put in just over 1.2 million. So all of a sudden, I'd got the means to put much more of the company's resources into developing the helicopter directly. And it was around that time that we'd met, and I'd started exercising the idea of how would you get this thing to market? How could you start this? And I'd come up with this. I say I'd come up with it. It wasn't my idea, right? One of the many people that I reached out to, that's now a customer in the 100 Club.
You told me this story.
Yeah, he was recommended to me by the people that sold me our 3D CAD software at the time. He said, "You need to talk to Nigel. He's into helicopters and he's an investor. Why don't you go and talk to him?" And so I invited Nigel up to see me in our little office. We got a little 2-room office at that point, and he flew up in his MD500, and he came, and I talked him through everything. I'd showed him those early silverfish renders that I'd done.
Yeah.
And he looked at it and he said, you don't need investment. People would pay for this. And so to this day, I blame Nigel for everything that's happened since then. And so at that point we'd got this idea for like a Friends of the Founder program where we could give a big discount on the list price of the helicopter because of the vertical integration in return for a big deposit, and we were setting out to sell 100 of them, you know. And so the idea there was we'd sort of sweated it for a decade, doing little bits wherever we could. We got a little bit of grant money to help us. I think it's 250,000 we got to help get the engine to the point where we got a concept for the very early version of GT50, the one with 3 can combustors and all of that. We got that together, and then with the advent of the grant, that allowed us to really develop the helicopter. And then Nigel came along and said, you know what, people would buy this. There's such a massive need for something like this. People want it so much. You could sell this. And at that point, I thought, okay, we'll sell it then. And the rest is kind of history, really. After that, that's the direction I intended to pursue.
So we kickstarted the sales in 2020. If you were to be totally sincere, you remember that the first months, they were tough.
Yeah.
We didn't have many sales, right? They were tough.
Well,
it was hard work.
We kind of did the traditional thing, didn't we? Where you bootlegged it round to friends and family, and they all said whatever.
No. You know what? I don't think we did sell. I think we had sold to probably 2 or 3 friends.
Yeah.
That was it, right? And then after that, everything was novel for us. Like nobody that we knew before. But it was tough in the beginning. But what were you thinking 2020? We started selling in August 2020. As you said, a vision, renders, right?
Yeah.
That time the research and development phase was quite mature, but the kickstart of doing any part of the helicopter had not started yet. How many you think you're going to sell?
Well,
but wait a second. But before you say that, I want to ask your sincerity. Did you ever dream that you were going to be this successful? Your helicopter was this successful?
No way.
No.
Yeah. When we started this, I think I would use the phrase, I didn't dare to believe that it would be possible, but
What was that?
That we could.
Why?
Why? Because it's my dream, right? To make this helicopter. It's all I've ever wanted to do, and it's the whole thing is very precious to me. It means the world to me, and I'd spent essentially 20 years having doors shut in my face saying, no, it'll never, no, you're a dreamer, no, it'll never happen, no, you haven't got the right stuff, no, for 20 years, right? And then all of a sudden, we've got it just far enough where it looks like there might be an avenue. And this is looking it through the eyes of a businessman now, somebody that's got 10 to 15 years worth of war wounds down his back and his arms. And I thought, do you know what? Everybody is really fed up with this industry. Everybody thinks and knows it's rubbish and somebody must be able to do better. And when you think about it, the kind of people that buy helicopters are really, really experienced business people anyway. So they get it's a bit of a rip-off and we can do better. And I kind of dared to believe that it could work.
But not at this scale.
But didn't want it to fall on its face because I didn't know how many other options we would have after that at that stage, because I couldn't work any harder, I couldn't put any more into myself. If I was to try and make my business bigger to fund it, that would be another 5 or 10 year distraction, and then I'm getting a bit old. And I knew that you were never going to get something like this off the ground with traditional investors from the millions of conversations I'd had beforehand, because at that stage, it was just mad. As a kid that's never done it before, wanting to do something where there doesn't appear to be any market, and the guys that have got it have had it forever, right? And so it felt like a one-shot deal to get this to work at the time. And I think we thought that if everything went amazingly well, if you got enough people with kind of Nigel's kind of attitude, where he'd have a go because he wanted it to succeed. He believed somebody needed to do it, and we have got a lot of people like that in the early customer base. People who it's not about the helicopter; it's about somebody's got to do this. Yeah, and
there's a drive beyond the
yeah,
helicopter.
yeah,
Yes.
and we thought. Well, I thought we'd sell 100 before production started. You know, and I thought that was going to take the full period that we were in development for. And I knew we'd sell lots afterwards because I know this market and I know this product, right? I knew we'd sell loads afterwards. But getting people over the line for the risk and the uncertainty and the apparent non-existence of the GA market and the trust in a guy from another part of the world that you don't know to do something that's preposterous in scale. So I thought we'd sell 100 by the time we got the thing, not by production, by the time we got the thing flying. I thought we'd be able to fight our way up to 100. And yeah, I didn't. Well, you can tell by the terms that we set out that we never believed we'd exceed that. You know, so yeah, 100.
Very good. You know, you just mentioned key words, and that is prevalent not only is a requirement of the early stage and throughout the whole program, it's a key component, but for myself actually to work together with you, I would say that number one that I identified in you was character. And it's super interesting because you did describe your background, where you came from, the ethics, how that was built up and shaped you, and actually the percentage of impact. Because some people can go back and say, yeah, you know, I'm a PhD in aerodynamics, you know, for sure, right? I'm qualified. But what qualifies individual to do what you have done, the core element is character.
Yeah.
And I respect that a lot in you. And it's a comment that I want to make sure that I want to tell you here on camera, because that was something that moved me personally. And I think that that's what moves clients as well.
Yeah.
Because there has to be an element of trust in this program that no matter what, we're going to be finding a way, there could be a technical challenge, any situation that can be solved. We had many actually until now, right? But the man, the individual that has that drive, that is shaped by a character that will become deterministic of the outcome. So that is the element. That's a key element that I want to put up out here at this point. You're a pilot as well.
Yeah.
So you understood what the pilot wants, right? So we look at the helicopter, beautiful. It has an element. You know, I've always been fascinated. You know, I'm not an engineer. I did study engineering for 2 years. I
You're
failed
a dropout,
miserably,
aren't you, Ruben?
miserably. But one thing that my wife is really artistic, and I cannot do art. She can do art in many forms, but I can appreciate art.
Yeah.
I can't do art. I did play the violin though. Did I tell you this? 12 years? Yeah, I play violin. I'm a musician. Okay. See, I surprised you. Anyhow, so I look at this helicopter. It's a piece of art. So what is how was art part of your life? Because I know you had a lot of help and, experts and people that helped you shape this helicopter in many ways, but you knew the beauty that you wanted to achieve.
Yeah.
What was that?
So there's two things really. I'm not somebody that does art for fun. I was very, very good at technical illustration. So I used to be able to do airbrush renderings and things like that at high school. I got very, very good at that sort of stuff long before you could do computer renders and things. I know how to do that stuff by hand. Yeah. And
So you know how to draw.
I can draw. Yeah,
You can draw.
I can draw technical drawings by hand. I'm not a great sketch artist. If you put one of my sketches next to one of Henry's, it looks like the spiders had a go on mine. So I'm not a natural artist like that, but I've got a very clear idea of what ingredients go into making things really attractive. And I built the early models of HX50 around technical principles, but we'd got a very clear idea of the magic ingredients that needed to go into to make it beautiful. And because aircraft have such a long service life, we knew that we needed to lean very heavily on organic shapes. So things that you can draw the roots of them in the animal kingdom, because they've been there for eternity, right? They've always been there. We're preconditioned to think that's beautiful, right? So if you look at the form of the body, it's bird-like, it's fish-like, it's
dolphin.
It's things that we already know are streamlined. You're expecting it to look like that. And then we wanted to give the shape a sort of animalistic muscularity. So the subtle sculptures are supposed to follow, are supposed to infer sort of the natural organic muscle tone, a description that there's something strong underneath the skin. And it's those sorts of elements that were the key ingredients. And then don't do anything that's of this minute. You know, you've got to make sure that it's timeless and it's elegant. So the design and the creative process was very, very, very restrained. Yeah, we don't want this to look like a Lamborghini because it will be tired tomorrow, and these are going to be around for 50 years.
Fascinating.
But the person that really implemented all of this, that took that basic set of instructions and turned that into a physical form, is Henry Mooreshead, who's our chief designer, and he's the most amazing sculptor you can ever imagine. He's the true artist behind all of this. You know, I knew what it needed to be. I knew what it needed to look like, and every time he sort of veered away from what I wanted it to be. I'd push back, and we fight like cat and dog. We always have, and we still do, right? Because we both think we know better than each other. But he's the guy that people have got to thank for how this has turned out, and the beautiful pylon and the mast cowling and things. That's Henry's work of art, really. This is his masterpiece, as much as it's mine. I've got some pictures actually of what it looked like before Henry got involved, and you can still see all of the ingredients, but it does look like a design and technology student's drawn it. Yeah, and so it's Henry that's brought this up to the level
You're
that
absolutely
it is
right,
today.
because you look at the helicopter, it looks like a elegant animal that is muscular.
Yeah.
Like it has muscle,
Yeah,
but it stands the test of time.
yeah.
You can really appreciate it. It's a piece of art.
Pure, simple lines that echo things that you've seen forever in the animal kingdom. And it just makes you feel like it's meant to be like that. We don't need to change it because it's meant to be like that. Yeah. Birds don't change their shape for the new season because they're meant to be like that. Yeah. And that was the kind of longevity that we were trying to generate in the design.
Super interesting. You're a pilot?
Yeah.
I forgot to ask you, when did you become a pilot?
1999. So I've been flying for 26 years now.
And you have more passion to design a helicopter than flying. Is that right or similar?
I love flying helicopters more every time I fly a helicopter.
You get to fly. You don't have time to fly.
It's something, yeah. It's something that's never got old for me, but that would have never fulfilled me in its own right. You know, I really like being a private pilot. I really like being able to, if we've got to go from here to Cornwall, to fly Izzy and the kids and myself on holiday for a week. If I want to be in 3 different places in the country on the same day, I love being able to pull the helicopter out and go and do all of that in the same day. I love being able to fly from home to a hotel or a restaurant and have an amazing experience. I love flying for the love of flying.
Up in the air and looking down.
the freedom of it and the perspective on the world that it gives you, this sort of
Disconnect.
otherworldly magic carpet ride, and if
There's a world down there, there's a world
yeah,
here, and
yeah,
that experience is
it's still it's still one of the things that I love most in the world is flying helicopters, and it's I love sharing it with people as well. I love taking people flying for the first time. I love taking.
I have the same feelings.
Whenever you land anywhere, there's always kids that are fascinated by it, and when you shut down, they'll come up and I always take the time to sit them in the helicopter and explain what everything does, and let the parents take pictures of them. And I love everything about flying, but that in its own right would never have fulfilled me as a job. I couldn't have been a charter pilot or a
totally different.
It's that's that would have left me with a very
void. Yes, so not even
an unfulfilled mind.
Exactly.
You know, my mind would have. What we do here is very difficult, and I've got used to doing very difficult stuff all the time, and I need that kind of stimulation. But I've had an amazing run this summer where I've done a lot of flying. I've flown almost every day between end of March and end of September until our lovely weather took over. And I'm really missing it. And that's just going backwards and forwards to work. And at the moment, I'm really missing it because of the short days, the dark nights, the bad weather. And I'm itching to go flying, but obviously I work very long days, so I haven't touched the thing for nearly 6 weeks now. So yeah, I love flying. I love being a helicopter pilot. I love what being a private pilot can offer in your life, and I just love the magic carpet ride that it provides. It's otherworldly.
One word that I see used many times is difficult. You like difficult things.
Yeah, difficult's what makes it worthwhile.
Why is that?
Well, because anything that comes easily, you take for granted. And when something is difficult and it requires sustained effort and hard work and capability to achieve it, it means that not everybody can have it, not everybody can do it. And when you eventually get it, it's really worth something. And it gives you an amazing sense of achievement to have been able to create something that's very difficult to do. And it means that when you've created it, not many other people are going to be able to do the same. So you've got something that's inherently worthwhile as well. And so difficult is good for lots of reasons. The whole world is built on difficult. People that do difficult things do very well. Yeah. If it's easy, anybody can do it, and then it's worthless.
So you enjoy the journey more than the final achievement, or you think that, well, when this, obviously, I imagine the moment that you're going to be flying for the first time yourself, the helicopter that you design, it's probably going to be the highest moment of your life, one of the top ones for sure, right?
Definitely, by far. No, it will be the best moment of my life by far, and I'll get shouted at when I go home for that, but it will.
I want to go back to home in a second.
But the reason that that's the best moment of your life is because of the 48 years
difficult times
that it took to achieve it. It only means so much because it was what you've put into it, and what it represents. You know, if I'd have fallen out of bed the day after I finished my PhD and designed it that day and built it the day after, it wouldn't feel the same. You'd just think, well, I'm clearly a clever chap having done that so quickly, but it wouldn't mean the same. You know, it's what you have to put into something, and how that sets you apart from the competition that defines its value to you in terms of professional and human fulfillment, but it's also what positions its value to the market and to other people as well. Yeah.
You mentioned how your family, well, your upbringing actually shaped you.
Yeah.
You have a family now?
Yeah.
You have kids?
Yeah.
3 kids?
3 kids, 3 boys.
You have a lovely wife, Isi?
I do.
And I know she's super supportive.
She's amazing.
My entrepreneurial life, my whole life, I always say that I only achieve what I have achieved because of Nancy. You know that as well. We share that together.
Yeah.
And how is it going back home? And every time I talk with Isi, it's almost like she's designed the helicopter with you. Like she has no technical, obviously she's not involved technically, but it seems like it's her helicopter as well.
Yeah.
She sees you doing it, but it's a family thing.
Yeah.
How is it? Do you share this when you go back home? How much do you share of your difficulties during the day, and how much is that interaction affects and shapes you at the moment?
It's a balance, right? Because again, home is your sanctuary. So when I go home,
when you get the support,
I want
the energy.
I want to dedicate myself to Izzy and the kids. And you've got to understand, my eldest son is 15 now, so that decade and a half has gone like that because I've been so busy the whole time. And I'm very, very careful, even now, to make sure at the weekend I dedicate my time to Izzy. I'm a football dad. I run around taking the kids to sports clubs and to tennis clubs, and Izzy and I go out every Friday night. So we're very, very, I'm very protective about making sure that I don't dedicate my whole life to these problems I'm trying to solve for a bunch of other people, and then find that I'd neglected the people that was so important.
Yes.
And so there's a balance between not wanting to bring work home and to labour that on Izzy that can't do as much about it as I can, because that's not her role, you know.
But she lives it.
But I never shut up about this stuff, right? So she's learned almost everything about the engine, about the helicopter, about the business, about the people, about the customers by osmosis, because I never shut up about it. And the kids are the same. The kids, both the middle son Dan and Joe, the youngest one, I say, "Oh, Dad, when can we fly one of our helicopters?" I just get all the time, "When can we fly one of ours?" So they've lived and breathed it as well. But Izzy's been amazing, right? Because she came from a completely different background to what I grew up in. In fact, the polar opposite background. You know, both of her parents were teachers and civil servants, and so their experience of professional life couldn't be any more different. And so in our early days, that obviously created some friction, because you've got two totally different perspectives on what normal looks like. And of course, when you start in a business, all you get is the hassle, right? You don't make any money. You just get the long hours, the difficulty. When you go home, you're not really at home. You head somewhere else, and then you're left with a wife that says,
"What am I doing here?
I've been telling you this all along. This is a stupid idea. You should do it like this." And so that was something that we had to navigate together in the early years. But when Dynamiq started making good money, and we were able to buy our first decent house and start having nice cars, and all of a sudden, we never worried about money anymore. And that was the point that yeah, now I get it. Now I can see it. And that doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual transition. But throughout all of that, she supported me 100%. And I think it's fair to say as well, I credited my dad with supporting me when I was writing up my PhD. We were actually largely funded by a stipend that Izzy had got for finishing her teacher training. So she actually funded the whole household, plus a little bit of top up from my parents that kept us in food and a roof over our head while I was writing up my PhD. So even back then, she was a total stalwart. She was a rock. And then as we've gone through, she's been there for every step of the journey. And we've had three kids together, and we're both very, very active parents of them as well. We spend a lot of time with them, do a lot. But Izzy does the lion's share of the running around after the kids in the evenings, and has just been amazing to give me the professional space that I've needed to nurture this fourth child into existence. And you know, I I'm pretty good at handling the stress because of the decade and a half, 2 decades now of training that I've had to do it. But
In Dynamiq.
as you can imagine, that was just in Dynamiq. But as you can imagine now, the stakes are so high with what we do, and what we're doing is clearly such a big, difficult thing to do. She has to watch that from the sidelines. You know, she there's not many levers that she can pull to change the direction of what we're doing or have any impact on it. That's a really difficult position for a wife and a spouse to be in, where they're there to support, but the amount of impact that they can have on key things that change the outcomes is very limited. And she's been amazing with that. She's been amazing. She's coped with it incredibly well. She's adapted to it really well. She's been amazing with the customers. She's very active with all of the customer events. She's always visible and present, and she interacts with them all as well. And she's become as much of a trusted figure, quite rightly so, as a half owner of the company, as I have with the customers. So I think what people see in us is just stand up, reliable people. What you see is what you get. What you see in the videos is what you'll see if you come here to PC1. When you meet me, I'm exactly the same as I can come across in the videos as well. What you see is what you get, and that's true of both my parents and my family. It's true of my family that I've built at home with Izzy and the kids. It's there's one truth, one source of truth.
That's right. Talk about customers. You know, we could say that the results of sales have surprised us both a lot.
Yeah.
But one thing that personally have impacted me a lot in this project is just the level of support, involvement, and just skin in the game, and almost like we have built a tribe of individuals that have been amazing supporting this project. And this is it's a legacy case study of symbiosis between clients and company, to a point that really we have there's a community that I have not seen before in any other product.
Yeah.
Did that surprise you?
Very much so. And again, I think it's another. I can't take credit for this. We did things for certain reasons, and they had some positive unintended consequences. So, you know, I was very aware from all of these years of chasing much more experienced and successful businessmen than myself to look for sources of investment, that these people were just better at it than me. You know, they were more experienced, they were more knowledgeable, they'd seen all the tricks of the trades and all the angles before. So you couldn't do anything but just tell the truth, right? You had to be totally straight with these people. It's what my dad's always taught me. He's always been very much just tell the truth. And there were a couple of people that I worked with. I did some expert witness work for a while. And there was a lady that was the partner at the law firm that just said to me, no secrets, no surprises. It's the fundamental principle of our firm. No secrets, no surprises. Just tell the truth and tell it now. And I'd got that ringing in my ears when we started this. I knew these people, you couldn't fool them. You've got to tell them the truth. So the process started by us just having to tell everybody everything all the time. And when you start business, that's not an intuitive way of coming at it. You think that you've got to give a certain perception. You think that you've got to always appear like you've got everything under control. You've got to. You sometimes think that you've got to feel you've got every angle covered. Well, that's a really naive way of looking at it, because in reality it never works like that, and you'll never always be in that position. And when you're dealing with a bunch of people that have got loads of experience of doing loads of different difficult things, they already know that too. And so we came to this with the perspective that, look, this is a crazy thing to try and do, and everybody that can afford to buy one of these will know that this is a crazy thing to try and do. And that isn't necessarily going to stop it, right? Because these people also really, really, really want somebody to do this. They've been ignored for years for the product refinements that they want, the way they want to be treated in customer service, the way they want the whole general aviation industry to be. The industry community has been ignored at large for decades, and so there was so much built up frustration in that market that we came in and we just said, we know we can do this. We haven't done it before, but we know we can do this. And we created a financial arrangement where there was jam in it for everybody, right? We discounted the early helicopters, so the early adopters had a big financial incentive to come and support us. They were people that really wanted a better general aviation. They wanted better helicopter products. And because we were just so honest about where we were and transparent about progress, it meant they were always completely connected. They always knew exactly where we were. And I think all of that happening at a time where they felt that the existing manufacturers were taking them for granted with what they were charging and the way they were being treated with wait times for parts and service and everything that we all know is wrong with the industry at the moment. And then the general culture that we live in, where we kind of accept that people just and corporations and politicians just don't tell the truth anymore. Everything, you can't believe anything anybody tells you ever. And so for us to come along and have a policy where, well, we've got to tell the truth because they're going to see through us straight away if we don't. So we did that because we had to, not because we thought it was a brilliant idea at the time, because we had to. It turned out to be a really brilliant idea. But then another set of happy environmental coincidental conditions were that the world was stagnant with this failure to tell the truth everywhere in sort of the way things are marketed, in the way politicians speak to each other, in general professional life. Nobody really ever tells the full truth. And so to do that, it was like the total antithesis of everything that people were used to. And so it made everybody just sit up and think, oh, hang on a minute, this is different. These guys have come in, they've told us up front that it's a really difficult thing to do, but they think they can do it. They're prepared to share in the success by giving us these big discounts, so we all win big when it becomes successful. And we keep them totally up to date all the way through. And that's built a level of trust, plus the fact that the product itself is like a longed for child, isn't it? It's something that all of these people have dreamt for and wanted for decades. For many people, a helicopter's a trophy of your success, a trophy of everything you've achieved. But then for your trophy to look like that, it takes it to another level again. So I think that all of those conditions conspired to really bring this movement that we've created into a group of people that really want it and feel neglected and poorly treated by where they've had to buy their machines from before. Coupled with a relatively young and energetic guy that had clearly got the capability to do it, but couldn't do it unless we all did it together. And then an operating approach that made total sense commercially. Yeah, it's not difficult. You just cut out all the middlemen and then we can do it cheaper. Yeah, and the story was very simple. The business argument was very simple. And the product wasn't a mad change in direction. It wasn't, let's put 15 propellers and 17 engines and batteries everywhere. It's just another helicopter, but it's a really good one. Yeah, it made all of that really simple.
Common sense.
A common sense approach to all of the nonsense when you're talking to straight talking people that know it all anyway. You can't pull the wool over the eyes. So I think it was that combination of factors. And I do think that to a certain extent we've existed in the Goldilocks zone, right? We've had the perfect combination of timing and commercial conditions in the market, the level of frustration, a very uncertain period in aviation with, are we all going electric? Are we all going to have 15 propellers or not? And all that's happened at the same time, coupled with it just came right for the point in my life when I was physically and mentally able to do it. And I think we've just had that really fortunate period where all of that's come together at the right time. And it may never happen again, or it may never happen for a couple of generations in terms of something that has the ability to make this much of a seismic shift to a whole industry.
Jason, I have two more questions for you. where you want to take Hill Helicopters.
So Hill Helicopters is a company that I've developed to make general aviation everything that I believe it can be. So all of the things that I've just described about how much joy flying brings me, I think there are lots of ways that we can deliver that to a much broader group of people. So I want Hill Helicopters to be the name in general aviation. Yeah, I want to create a general aviation powerhouse. So I want to immediately grow the helicopter product line to bigger and more capable machines. But the fact that we've built a manufacturing platform here means that we can take that engine and we can take those avionics and we can take these lovely composite structures and we can make lots of other different kind of aircraft. So I can see a fixed wing equivalent to HX50, we're going to call it AC60, a really high speed, long range, beautiful baby business jet.
Same engine.
It'll be the same engine, yeah. So it'll be a turboprop that's really got legs, a perfect companion to HX50, and then similarly to the multi-engine helicopter, we can do a multi-engine bigger version of that can go higher, faster, further. And then once we've done that, I would like to grow into some of the other areas of aviation that are really exciting. So I can see us being able to do business jets and things like that. And then it'll come down to how much time have I got, right? Because all of these things take time. But I'd like Hill Aviation or the Hill Group to become the preeminent force in general aviation. I want us to make the best, the coolest, the most cost-effective light aircraft in all of the sectors that general aviation touches. And I want to do that so that we can expand the general aviation movement from a private owner point of view and give as many people the access to this wonderful life that you and I have experienced as possible. But I also want to put really productive, hard-working commercial versions of these machines into the hands of people that share our passion about aviation, but just aren't given the tools at the moment for it to be profitable or marketable, you know? And so I'd like to drive the commercial side of general aviation back into a paying basis, make it possible to make money out of these things. So small scale hub and spoke charter with the fixed wing aeroplanes, sort of all of the kind of work that the eVTOL movement's going after. We can do that. We can do that with HC50. We can do that with HC80, the multi-engine helicopter as well, at a price point an order of magnitude below what they're going to be able to get to, because we make everything, right? We make everything. We've driven the costs down and we've made aircraft that people want to be in. The aircraft are cool. You know, the aircraft are desirable. It's a beautiful flying experience and it's got a proven pathway to get it approved and into service. So we haven't got the regulatory hurdles that these other types of aircraft have. So the simple answer to that question is I want Hill to dominate general aviation over the next 40 years. And that's my drive and ambition behind this. We want the general aviation market.
You're 47 now, right?
Yeah.
Today we are at the end of 2025. In 2065, be pretty much at the end of your career, let's say.
Oh, I don't know. I'll still have a few years left.
How you want to be remembered for? For what?
I would love it if I'd got far enough that I was remembered as the guy that completely redefined general aviation, that made general aviation accessible to a broader group of people, that made flying a way of life, so flying light aircraft a way of life, the way it used to be in the 60s and 70s. I'd like to be seen as the the guy that always played fair, so always played with a straight bat, did what he said he was going to do, and looked after every single customer that bought one of his aircraft or had anything to do with our business. That extends actually to our suppliers, our supply chain. Just a totally straight talking, fair and loyal businessman that did what he said he was going to do. And I think if we can have that impact and be remembered as a guy that was very straightforward and easy to work with, then I think that will have been a success.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Jason. We have known a little bit more about you in this conversation. It was a special one. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Ruben. Good to talk to you as always.